Yankees Files podcast. We are back. I'm Will Harris, you're Alec Whipple, and the rest of you are fans of the team that is projected to produce the most Fangraphs WAR in the American League. Those are the New York Yankees. Whipple, it's been a while since we last podcasted. This is the first Yankees Files podcast of 2024 here in the fourth season of Yankees Files. We're coming up on 100 episodes. This is number 98. The Yankees signed Marcus Stroman. We had the Hall of Fame selections were made earlier today. We've got all kinds of stuff to discuss. You went to New Orleans and won a fake baseball arbitration competition, which is pretty wild. So we've got a lot to talk about. But first, let's check in. How you doing?
I am feeling good. As you said, I'm fresh off the plane from New Orleans. I brought home some hardware for the Yankees Files crew and for William and Mary Law School. And obviously Yankees Files is more important. So I'll lead with that. But it's 2024. It's our fourth calendar year of doing these things. And I feel like we got a big year ahead. I mean, the Yankees have Juan Soto. You have a wedding. And I think those are about like the same level of importance. And I'm excited to celebrate both of them at various points this year. So yeah, that's, I think, how can you not be romantic about baseball and romance? It's going to be, I feel like this is a big year for like, well, actually, funny story. After, well, you know this, but our listeners don't. After we recorded our last episode, I was at home and my sister is like, yeah, I would listen to the pod if there was more non-baseball content. And she really wants Will to just talk about his wedding. So I feel like this is going to be a big year for just like personal anecdotes, some wedding files. My sister's a big Taylor Swift fan, and there's, you know, plenty of Taylor Swift music that'll be played at your wedding, I'm sure.
Well, this is a marriage of two pretty massive Swifties.
Yeah. So you've been tweeting about Swift. You've been tweeting about a lot of non-baseball topics. I think it's going to be a fun year for the Yankees. And when it's a fun year for the Yankees, when we don't have to spend the whole year fighting about why the team is bad, knock on wood, it'll be a fun year for some off baseball content. So I'm excited for that.
Well, you can't spell lifestyle without files.
Okay.
It's the first 5 letters of lifestyle are files, just in a different order.
That's true. I didn't want to do the quick math, but I'll take your word for it.
It's true. My wedding will not cost as much as Juan Soto costs this year, which is good. I think it would have been hard to make it cost that much.
Will it hit home runs as Juan Soto?
I don't think it will hit as many home runs or produce as much WAR, but like wedding above replacement, like it might be 5.5. Like we're gonna have a good time. So who knows? We'll see. Shout out to your sister if she's listening. I will certainly be trying to locate Taylor Swift in the city of Baltimore this weekend. Although I think she's probably just going to fly in the morning, go to the game, and leave in the afternoon. I doubt she's staying over. But, you know, you never know. We'll see what happens. You're only in the same city as Taylor Swift as often as you're in the same city as Taylor Swift. That's what I always say. Can't spell short circuit 2 without Lomo. Tweeting that.
And we're off to it. 2024 is off and running.
Off to a blazing start. So Whipple, we've had a number of tweets pop off recently, as is our way, but we had one pop off this morning about how much Gleyber Torres' plate discipline improved from 2022 to 2023. So, I noticed he had a 47% increase in his walk rate, not percentage point. That would be a record. Percent increase in his walk rate and a 35% decrease in his strikeout rate. And that's insane, especially since his slugging percentage stayed the same year over year. So he sacrificed a little bit of power for contact because some of the improvement or maintaining in slug was from batting average, but he struck out way less, slugged just as much, walked way more, got on base way more, and was obviously a much more productive offensive player in 2023 than in 2022. But the magnitude of those changes in walk rate and strikeout rate were really sticking out to me. So I figured I'd see like how, whether it was unique that he had done that. So I only looked at the changes between 2 years because I just figured that I should do this right before we started podcasting. So there were 86 players who were qualified hitters in both 2022 and 2023. Of those, 15 players had an increase in walk rate of at least 40%. So 13 players, about 15% of that group had an increase in walk rate above 40%. So not that weird, something between, one in every, a little more than one in every 7 players, I guess, or a little less than one in every 7 players did that. Of those guys who had an increase in walk rate of 40% or more, only 11 of them saw their strikeout rate decrease at all. So Nathaniel Lowe's didn't change and Ahmed Rosario's shot up or increased by about 10%. 11 of them had their strikeout rate decrease, but of those, 8 of them decreased by less than 10%. So decreasing by more than 10% was especially rare. Alec Boehm saw his strikeout rate fall by 11.5%. That's pretty good. You increase your walk rate by 40%, you decrease your strikeout rate by 11.5%. That's good. Those are the directions you want those things to go. Jeremy Pena decreases strikeout rate by 16%. Good for him. He actually had a really good plate discipline year, even though we figured out that he probably isn't, very good offensively, which I think we already knew. But anyway, Jeremy Pena was the closest guy to Gleyber Torres. Gleyber Torres' strikeout rate decreased 35.5%. That's 20 more percentage points than Jeremy Pena, who's the closest guy to him. So it is ridiculous what Gleyber did as far as increasing his walk rate by that much and decreasing his strikeout rate by that amount. He was the only guy whose strikeout rate decreased by more than 16% and walk rate increased by 40 or more percent. That's ridiculous. Like, I don't know that everyone appreciated during the season just how much better things had gotten. And this was even with him, when we talk about holistic offensive output, underperforming relative to his quality of contact stats. Like, it is not easy to make this change. Almost everyone who makes a change to decrease their strikeout rate that significantly, which is not a common thing to do, to decrease by more than a third, is doing it by sacrificing good contact just to make more contact. And the fact that his holistic offensive performance improved year over year, his slugging percentage didn't change, that's amazing. Like, it takes a really talented player and a really particular skill set applied very well to have such a change in approach like this. And I think people should really appreciate that about Gleyber Torres. It's an incredible improvement that he made. And we should be really excited when we consider that his quality of contact was even better than the stats he realized about what he has to offer at the plate here in 2024.
Yeah, I feel like people are missing kind of the arc of Gleyber Torres' career. Like, they're missing the improvements, the very real improvements that have been made the last 2 years because of what happened the first 2 years, which is fair. I mean, those numbers were flashy in the middle of his career. Thus far, the numbers were definitely down. But in terms of like what he's done the last 2 years, like, he has made very real, tangible offensive improvements that have taken him from just a product of the rocket ball to a legitimate third option behind Judge and Soto. I mean, we saw from the beginning of the year where he was, from day one, I mean, hitting better, walking better. I think that's the thing that's always stuck out with me. Mm-hmm. For him, you knew he hit for power, but he showed his ability to boost that walk rate this year. And I just think people expect a certain caliber of number from him that is unrealistic for like a lot of players based on the fact that it's not a juice ball anymore. Gleyber Torres, I have full confidence in the fact that he can hit, I mean, 4th or 5th in this lineup. Like, there's a lot of different lineup combinations going around right now. And I don't know, it doesn't sound like he's going to be the leadoff hitter, but I feel like he should be the cleanup hitter. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not upset about that. Like I feel like it's not a hot take. Like it shouldn't be a hot take. I mean, he's been that good and he's going to be, in his walk year, whatever boost in performance that gives, but just a complete all around hitter that
Up
by
until now, though, 2023 was his walk year. Hey.
ha 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 ha.
Mm.
Anyway, I just feel like by WRC plus he's just as good as he was at his heights in 2019, and he's, as you said, a much better plate discipline hitter now. You combine that with the same kind of power. I mean, I think we're looking at a big year for him, and I think he's been on the trading block forever. And now that we're at the point where he probably won't be traded, I mean, again, like knock on wood, really, really hard. It makes sense that he was never traded because like the Yankees, I think, had confidence in him to do this, and people probably just were offering low ball trades. I think the Yankees are never going to sell low on a player they have confidence in. And I'm glad they didn't, because the last 2 years, and starting from late 2021, even, I mean, after he switched back to second base, like that's the hitter we've seen for the last 2.5 years. And it doesn't always stand out because it's not, 38 home runs at age 22, but we might be looking at a better hitter. I mean, definitely a wiser hitter.
Yeah. I will supplement the stat that I just gave about him. Of the players with big increases in walk rate, Gleyber having the biggest decrease in strikeout rate. I'll supplement that with, I didn't follow up on this like 4 days later or whenever the season ended, but I believe we ended the season with this being true. It's certainly true of Gleyber. Qualified hitters in 2023 with a walk rate of at least 10% and a strikeout rate under 15%. Adley Rutschman, Kyle Tucker, Ronald Acuna Jr., Jose Ramirez, Gleyber Torres. Like, underrate Gleyber Torres at your own peril. The guy is really, really good. And 2023 Whipple, as you said, was a great showcase of the serious, serious improvements that he made.
Wait, we have to use this time to talk about Gleyber Torres being underrated and another favorite topic of ours, the lists, the MLB lists.
Oh my gosh, the lists.
I think the strategy this year with the lists was we're going to fix the one error we had last year, Garrett Cole. Baseball, and we're going to systematically mess up every single aspect of every other list because these are bad. I mean, not just Gleyber. I mean, I feel like we're used to people underrating Gleyber Torres, but
yeah,
Kyle Tucker and Juan Soto, like
that was insane.
Pitching list behind Cole. I mean, Blake Snell is on the list, like top 5 pitcher. I think he was 5th. Verlander was on that list. There are pitchers who were not on that list that should have been. I mean, it's just up and down. It's been terrible. We love talking about lists, but these are not good.
I think, Whipple, we know the attitude that we have to adopt towards lists.
You can't care about them. They don't concern you.
I don't really concern myself with these lists.
A-Rod being on the top 10 third baseman born in July of 1975
list.
That's a list I could get behind. But any other list, I'm going to take it with a grain of salt. And I just feel
blame it on the right fielder.
I just feel like the MLB lists are functions of like, I want to know what stat they're sorting by from last year, but there is like some arcane stat that they have figured out, and they just look at last year's pitcher rankings or hitter rankings and they take it. There's no way these are predictive of any sort.
Well, there's no sane human being thinks that on a forward-looking basis, Bryson Stott is a better player than Gleyber Torres.
Right.
There's the Zach Geloff thing is like, look, if you want to get super excited about half a season in which he wildly outperformed his expected stats and had BABIP over 330, like, go ahead. And he's a pretty good defender. So good for him. But like this stuff, like all it is engagement farming. And we, at some point, and I think I tweeted this, like, we need to agree as a society, like, hey, we're not gonna tolerate this stuff anymore. Cause we can't give it attention. So we're hurting ourselves right now because now they're going to do it again next year, and Aaron Judge is going to be like, the 9th best outfielder behind, I don't want to slander anyone, but like, Alec Thomas will be ahead of him. And it's like, what are we doing here, guys?
Yeah. I mean, it's just, they say it's predictive. It's clearly a prisoner of the moment type list. Like that was confirmed when Garrett Cole was not on last year's list. Like I'm less surprised at what's happened this year, but yeah.
And they would like,
are we taking Kyle Tucker over Juan Soto? Like Kyle Tucker's a great player, but like, come on. Like it's stupid. I can't even posit an argument to it because it's so dumb.
Yeah, no, Kyle Tucker is a terrific player. Like there are not many players that you see a projection for them between like, I think his range from 4.6 to 5.2 Fangraphs WAR from what we have right now. And you're like, yeah, that makes sense. Juan Soto is widely projected for between like 5.5 and 6.5, or even a little more.
Right.
Like those players are not in the same stratosphere. Yeah. And Juan Soto is going into his age 25 season. That's always good to remember.
Yeah. Foolish baseball. Foolish Bailey had a great videos. Top 10 prospects that are older than Juan Soto. And there's like 10 real live breathing.
Yeah. Randy Vasquez was almost on that list, but like Matt Mervis is on that list, right? Like
Michael Bush.
Yeah.
For like
Michael Bush.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to say this a lot. I feel like in Judge and Soto, we're just going to have a lot of pods this year where we're like, you can't even, like, there's nothing to say.
It is crazy. Like, I remember the summer of 2018 when Soto came up, being like in college and working an internship, and like, I'd see him on MLB TV or whatever. And I don't know if you'll agree with this, but at that time in my life, I always felt like every baseball player was older than me.
Mm-hmm.
Because like they were adults and I was a student. The fact that I'm turning 28 this year and Juan Soto just turned 25, like not that long ago, that like doesn't compute for me. And like great for him. But yeah, like I guess I'm within 2 weeks of only being 2 years older than Juan Soto, but like still, it's ridiculous.
Right. We're about I'm a few months younger than you, and it's just like the same kind of feeling. I remember, Torres, you're older than Gleyber.
I'm older than Gleyber.
But it's about the same. I feel like as a Yankees fan, that was like the first time where I was like, wow, these players are like not like all like adults anymore. And I feel like Soto is like the extreme example. I mean, it was the same year. Like somebody is 19 and playing in Major League Baseball. I mean, he couldn't even drink when he won the World Series. Like that's and then now we're old men, and a lot of baseball players who were older than. Or were older then. But at that time, I mean, that's like, I feel like that's a seminal moment in every baseball fan's life when they're like, there's like somebody who's older. I'm older than.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I think that transitions well into the Hall of Fame discussion is like, think about all the players on this year's ballot who we saw play like so many games.
Yeah.
Rafael Devers was the first player to debut who was younger than I am. And I didn't like it. I think he was, at least. Anyway, James Shields. Like, we saw James Shields pitch like his entire career.
Yeah.
Like I don't think there's a single player. There may not be a single player on this ballot who. No, that's not true. There are only a couple players on this ballot who played games before we were born.
Right.
Like Manny debuted in 93. A-Rod obviously was 94. Andrew Jones, I think, came up in 95. He came up in 96. Omar Vizquel, I guess, is still on the ballot. But like most of these guys, some of these guys, we saw their entire career. Many of these guys exclusively played games during our lifetimes. And like that, I mean, I'm not sure who the best example is. It's probably one of the first year guys like Joe Mauer or Carlos Beltran, that guys who we saw play, certainly their entire peaks.
Yeah.
Are now getting into the Hall of Fame, meaning not only are their careers over, but a 5-year waiting period is over. And like, this is ridiculous. And I don't like it not one bit.
I think Mauer is the best example of like what you're saying. Cause it's like, I think Mauer is the first guy I can remember the like pre him being like really good, during him being really good, post him being really good. I feel like maybe Utley, but like, there was a time when like Joe Mauer was just a catcher for the Twins. And then there was a time where Joe Mauer was like the player. I mean, it's 2009. That was the MVP.
Yeah, it was 2009.
Like, 2008 to 2011. I mean, like your average baseball fan your average sports fan knew who a catcher from the Twins was. He had the commercials.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah, like that. I think it's
also, I mean, he won a batting title in 2006 at 23. Right. Like he burst onto the scene.
But it was like, I mean, the average baseball fan, I think Beltre, peaked in terms of popularity a little bit later. And maybe Utley is also a good example because he was like 2005 to 2010.
2005 to 2009, yeah.
But I think Mauer was just the most famous new player on the ballot who like really was the it guy in baseball for like a few years. And that's like weird to think about. And it's going to be even more next year because like Ichiro and CC definitely like clearly CC Sabathia. Like, I mean, I'm not even going to like think about that. Yeah. Like, that's like, the player's peak and peak fame aligning with when you're watching. And I think it's like, we just like view like Jeter and Mariano differently. Cause like, even we saw most of the games, but even the games you didn't see, like you kind of, read about them and watch Yankee so much. But like to really remember, like you saw this player's peak and you were like a part of the, the Mauer like movement during that 1 year. It's weird. It's so weird. I don't like it. And it's only going to keep getting worse. That's
I mean, I think you're totally right that it's Mauer, but like the fact that I remember Bobby Abreu getting traded to the Yankees and like remember that following his like ridiculous home run derby performance. And the fact that like, K-Rod tormented me for years and he's on the ballot. And I mean, yeah, it's completely ridiculous. I remember Carlos Beltran going to the Mets. I remember him playing for the Astros and what a big deal that was. Like, these are guys who we're past the point where it's like guys from when I started watching baseball, which is the tough part.
I think even the one and dones make it worse. Like Jose Bautista.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, we were like, that was like past when you start watching baseball, past when you like, like the 2009 era is like, okay, like I'm fully invested in the game now. And then he broke out and like, your average baseball fan today, like Jose Bautista was not that long ago. Like maybe you didn't start watching till recently, so you don't remember the Mauer hype, but like Jose Bautista just feels like it was yesterday that he was like 2015, less than 10 years ago. I don't know.
Well, that's the thing. Jose Bautista, when Rougned Odor punched him, we were in college.
Right. And I think Bautista fell off more quickly than other players.
But he was still a super relevant guy at that time.
Yeah. And I mean, the list goes on. It's just that I think Bautista might even be more extreme because he was not even on the baseball map until we were like fully, full functioning fans of the game.
Yeah.
And then he rose and fell and had the 5-year waiting period. And here we are. Like, that doesn't feel real.
Yeah, I don't like it. I don't like it, not one bit. So let's talk about the results. So obviously Joe Mauer got in. Todd Helton finally got in.
Both of them had the skin of their teeth. I didn't realize Mauer was that close until like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, it was 5 votes for Mauer or 4 votes. And Billy Wagner, of course, missed by so Joe Mauer got in by 4 votes. Billy Wagner missed by 5 votes, which is ridiculous. Gary Sheffield missed by 45 or 43 votes. Andrew Jones was also up there, but Beltre, Helton, and Mauer all made it. Any Do you take issue with any of those?
No, I mean, definitely
Agreed.
the first timers. And I think Helton was trending towards this way. And I mean, one of the top hitters during, even those cores, even though it was steroid era, whatever caveats, I mean, he was a really good hitter. And I just tend to think like if you're the best hitter in franchise history and you have the numbers, like he's a Rocky. You got to tell the story of baseball with the course field in the early 2000s. So
this is why Khalil Green belongs in the Hall of Fame. I do not acknowledge the existence of Tony Gwynn. Of the guys who got at least 50% of the vote but did not get in, so that is Beltran, Jones, Sheffield, and Wagner, who is the most egregious exclusion?
I think, wait, sorry, Beltran, Sheffield,
Andrew Jones, and Billy Wagner.
Okay. I mean, I think it's either Sheffield or Beltran. I know Sheffield has the hitting numbers, but I just feel like without the sign stealing stuff, Beltran would be in already. And I feel like there's caveats or there's like reasons to keep Sheffield out, but I don't think they're good reasons. I'd go Beltran 1, Sheffield 2.
Yeah, I think I agree that Beltran is the most egregious exclusion, but I think like maybe if you like this is where Hall of Fame balloting gets tough, because the question you then ask yourself is, do I have to adjust for years on the ballot?
Right.
But I think you're right about Carlos Beltran, because since integration of guys who played at least 50% of their games in center field, he has the 5th most Baseball Reference WAR. Willie Mays, Mickey Mantle, Mike Trout, Ken Griffey Jr., Carlos Beltran. For guys whose careers spanned before and after integration, they're only getting the post-integration credit there, just for reference. But 1947 to today, Carlos Beltran, 70 Baseball Reference WAR. Only 4 guys who are primary center fielders have done more than that. And I think you're right that, like, look, I don't think that we should minimize what the Astros did. But in the specific case of Carlos, like specifically as it relates to Carlos Beltran's Hall of Fame case, conduct that he was involved in a season when he had negative 0.8 WAR kind of doesn't feel like what we should be holding against him.
Right. I just feel like my Hall philosophy is like, just everyone should be in, like, it's story of baseball. I know you feel the same way. I don't think you've gate kept maybe like a Kurt Schilling exemption. I mean, that never hurt anyone, but like,
yeah, I tweeted at someone the other day that I basically think if you have 60 WAR, you should be in the Hall of Fame.
Like if Jose Altuve, if and when he is on the ballot, and if his career goes the way it's going, like I think he's going to be a Hall of Famer. And like I'd vote for him. I don't know if personally I would love that, but like you have to respect the career. And I think Beltran is a similar example. I don't know. I mean, worse hitter, more involved in the scandal. I just don't like the writers deciding like what this is all worth.
It's such a broken system. Like that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. Is this is a ridiculous way to decide if the Hall of Fame means something, and maybe we just all collectively decide that the Hall of Fame doesn't mean anything, but that's not the state of the situation. Like that's not the state of things. If the Hall of Fame is to mean something, this is a ridiculous way for us to decide who's in it.
I mean,
because like we see ballots come through that have Omar Vizquel on them. And if you aren't aware of the kind of stuff Omar Vizquel was involved in or accused of, I encourage you to look it up. And he wasn't a good baseball player as compared to guys who make the Hall of Fame. Guys who have Omar Vizquel and don't have Todd Helton, or guys who have, Torrey Hunter and don't have Alex Rodriguez, like it's a ridiculous way for us to decide who's in the Hall of Fame. And frankly, it makes the Hall of Fame feel like it means a lot less to me, because why do why should I give any legitimacy to the process that says, yeah, Roger Clemens is not one of the best players of all time. Alex Rodriguez is not one of the best players of all time. Manny Ramirez isn't worth commemorating, but Jim Rice is. Like, this is absurd. It's complete absurdity to operate this way.
Yeah, I think that part continuously pisses everyone off. I think the thing that pisses me off most is that okay, I can get people drawing their moral lines wherever. I don't like it, but sure, they earn their vote. What really I think should be allowed is the people who draw the moral lines and then don't follow those moral lines. It's almost like there should be you fill out a 5-question survey about what kind of
and it spits your ballot back out.
Yeah, and then we just do that because if you don't want
one of the questions is just, did you vote for David Ortiz? And it's, if yes, then you vote for Gary Sheffield.
Right. Let's make it consistent, and whatever your moral stand is, I think you should at least vote in accordance with that. And the amount of this is me protecting baseball, so I'm gonna bend over backwards to keep X guy out but put Y guy in. It's just self-serving. I mean, and then you look at where these guys are from, and oftentimes, it's the Boston writers voting Ortiz in. I mean, Dan Shaughnessy was the funniest because I think he actually voted Beltran Maurer this year, but he used to just submit a Jeff Kent only ballot for 3 straight years. And that's so far out there. I almost respect it. So maybe I'm not even consistent because I don't even understand what logic is behind this.
What point are you making there?
Right. Jeff Kent is not the best anything of anything. Maybe the best second baseman of the Giants in the early
best
2000s.
Offensive second baseman pre-Robinson or pre-Chase Utley, I guess. I don't know.
That's my proposal for reform.
The inimitable Ali Muldoon from Twitter at AliBear29 tweeted about how people left A-Rod off their ballots and said, you really got to compare players to their peers because everyone was playing under the same circumstances. But it's her follow-up to that tweet that I think gets at something very true about a fault of this process. She said, I also feel like a lot of the writers who were around in those days are embarrassed because they all pumped up Bonds, McGuire, and everyone else, and now they want to distance themselves. It happened. It was a time and place, just the same as the dead ball era, and the best of the best should be in. We can't it's a perfect example of the conflict that the writers are having to deal with. They're like, oh no, did we ruin baseball because we said all the cheaters were really good? Now do we have to say all the cheaters were really bad? Look, no one should have been cheating, but the reality was it was so widespread that, and this is, by the way, the moral problem with steroids. Cheating was so widespread. Use of performance enhancing drugs was so widespread that it convinced people who, under other circumstances, would not have used PEDs that the only way to remain competitive was to do so. And once you reach that threshold, which they very clearly did, then it becomes impossible to police the morality of, well, this guy was doing it for this reason and this guy was doing it for that reason. I don't know what effect using HGH when he was recovering from an injury had on Andy Pettit's career. But I do know that at that time, even the Olympics had not banned HGH. Certainly Major League Baseball hadn't. And it gets held against him, and he gets 15% on the Hall of Fame ballot, which is ridiculous. Look at Andy Pettit's stats. Look at the guys who have compiled those stats. They're all in the Hall of Fame. But that's beside the point. Baseball writers having to deal with the changing standards that they are putting out into the world is one of the most ridiculous parts of this process. And I hate it. And there are so many guys on this ballot: A-Rod, Manny Ramirez, Gary Sheffield, Andy Pettit, possibly even Mark Burley, I could be convinced of, who are never going to make the Hall of Fame, partially because of the corrupt BS that is this process. And I really hate that. Really bothers me.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's just, to Ali's point on the tweet, I think writers are embarrassed. The commissioner is embarrassed. Clearly
the man from Milwaukee is embarrassed.
Clearly Bud Selig has everything in his career to distance himself and act like it wasn't his fault. And guess what? You know where he is today? In the Hall of Fame. So if that's not hypocrisy, I don't know what is. The other point is like, I think we ascribe like bad moral character, but like to what you said, like a lot of them are just trying to stay competitive, and sure, maybe some of them had malicious intent, but like we're now comparing all those people to like people who bet on baseball, people who, you know, use spitballs, people who cheated in probably more direct ways. Like it's just stupid. Like I'm the first one to say that like Pete Rose should not be in the Hall of Fame because he bet on baseball, but that seems like a different case, like where it's like a clear like moral character issue versus just like trying to stay competitive in the game that you make a living on, because these guys are super competitive, and like sure, it might cross a line when you're betting on it, but like if you see everyone else doing something, like you're not going to not do it. I mean, not everybody was betting on baseball, and like everyone was doing steroids directly correlated to your performance. Like again, these athletes are very competitive. If they didn't do it, I don't think like it was because they're trying to take the moral high ground. It was probably just because they didn't think it would help them. They thought it was easier to do it without it. They didn't have like the right teammates. Like I almost guarantee you, you know, there's no maybe few athletes who are like, I think this is morally bad, so I'm going to not cheat. That's what they'll tell you after. But it's probably just like, you know, I think I'm fine. I don't want to do this.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, look at the 2017 Astros. They all knew that they were doing something they weren't supposed to be doing. And who spoke up at the time?
Zero.
Nobody.
Yeah, you had the 2 years.
There are a million
later,
examples.
Who was it? Mike? No,
Mike Fiers.
Mike Fiers. Yeah, 2 years later.
Yeah,
like
no, it's ridiculous. Yeah. Should we talk about, since we are still in arbitration season, or at least the season in between players and teams exchanging numbers and players and teams actually going to arbitration, should we talk about the competition that you attended and the hardware that you brought home?
Sure. Yeah. So as I post on Twitter, came back from New Orleans with some hardware. So I'll explain because it's actually pretty interesting, and I'd love to, you know, shed some light on what actually happened for people to know. And, you know, I hope to go again next year. So, you know, maybe this will be part 1, and then in a year from now, I'll do part 2 of this. But essentially every year, Tulane Law School hosts a baseball arbitration competition. So they'll bring in 40, I think it was like 41 teams, and you are assigned either the player side or the team side of a mock arbitration hearing. So this year it was Adolis Garcia, Jazz Chisholm, and Justin Steele. And so my team, we had to do both sides, both player and team for Garcia. We represented the Cubs for Justin Steele. We represented the player for the Chisholm case. And there are 2 components. The first one, which is the one I took the award home in, it was kind of like, I mean, I'll hype myself up, but it was the secondary component of the tournament. Like the oral component was what we went down there to do. The written brief supported that. So we didn't win the whole thing. We won like the secondary award, but I mean, you know, you take it where you get it.
Yeah.
So the brief supported the oral argument, and in the oral argument, you essentially had to go through and pretend like you were either Jazz Chisholm or Adolis Garcia's agent, or, you know,
so did you win? Forgive me for interrupting you. Did you win the award for your body of written work, or for the written advocacy supporting one side of one case?
It was the body of written work for both briefs in the Garcia case. And
okay,
because we competed in the oral event, that's like we were eligible for that.
cool.
So it was like the substance of what we did, and then we went and argued it, and we put together decks. It was really interesting process, I think, to kind of take both sides of the hearing. On the player side, you realize it's a lot harder than the club side. I think that was my takeaway, because on the club side, you're kind of arguing, look, like Justin Steele hasn't done enough to perform, you know, to make this
so
much money.
Here, one sec. So for people who are not super well acquainted with the arbitration process, basically, when a player comes up from the minors, under typical circumstances, he is under the control of the team with which he comes up for 6 years. And for 3 years, again, typically that player will be paid the league minimum. And for 3 years, that player will be arbitration eligible. And basically a couple of things can happen. In the winter, The player says to the team, this is how much money I think I should make. The team says to the player, this is how much money we think you should make. And either they'll settle or eventually they'll go in front of an arbitrator, a judge of some sort, and the team will say, we think this player should be paid this much money. And typically, my understanding is this is like a comps-based analysis. So they'll say, hey, if you compare this player's performance to the performance of these players, you can see that it's very similar. Therefore, this player should be awarded about the amount of money that these players were awarded. The player, makes their own comparisons and says, actually, I should be in kind of this tier of arbitration contract. And that happens for 3 years. The rule of thumb is like 30% of market value in year 1, 50% of market value in year 2, 70% of market value in year 3. The other thing is typically the arbitrators aren't super well acquainted with like advanced baseball statistics or even much about baseball generally. So my understanding is one is encouraged to make an argument based very much on like traditional stats that you might have seen in a newspaper box score to draw comparisons. This leads to like relievers not making a lot of money if they don't get a lot of like wins or saves, things of that nature. Sorry for interrupting. Please continue. Because I'm interested in how you put together those analyses, because you probably think about player evaluation at kind of a deeper level than a lot of these conversations are meant to fly.
Yeah, no, it's helpful to explain because I've just been so wrapped up in it. But that's the process. I think one other thing I would note is that player files at, say, 5 million, club files at 8 million, midpoint is 6.5. If the arbitrator thinks he's worth $6,500,001, you go to the club. There's no like compromise. It's actually like a type of arbitration that's used outside of baseball, but it was originated. It's an all or nothing, supposed to encourage settlement. So when you're at that point,
the arbitrator will always choose either the club number or the player number. Yeah.
When you're at that point, you're not settling. You're going either player or club. And so I'll take you through each of the analyses. And I think you're right in that the reason that I'm trying to articulate this correctly, the reason that I don't think we did as well in the oral as the written is that I kind of know how to write in a straightforward manner, but I don't know how to argue persuasively at the level that needed to happen. Like I was almost like too high level, if that makes sense. I kind of, what I learned is that every single statistic you use in these proceedings, you have to put in like the layman's context, and you cannot use too many of them. Like if you're going to use, you can use WRC plus, you could use, like, I don't know, ERA plus, you can use whatever you want. You just have to explain it like they're an idiot, and then they will get it, and don't do it too often. I kind of came in. So I had my Garcia brief for the player, the ones I personally worked on, Steele for the club. The Steele for the club went a lot better because I think I learned my lessons and kind of had already done what needed to be done. Garcia for the player, I was very high level. I put together a lot of charts that were like trying to put a good, like a positive facts forward about his performance, doing a lot of stat comparisons that probably were a little too high level. But what I realized is you really have to make this like a narrative in these cases. Like you have to give them a reason like that you have to make it impossible for them to choose the other side. And what I was saying is that it's easier for the club because the player's always trying to break new ground. Like the player's trying to reach a new height in salary. The club's just trying to show that, like, listen, like he's asking for too much. The market's established. You don't go there because no one's gone there. And where I succeeded with Steele is by doing that, essentially saying, like, Justin Steele has this much WAR. WAR is about, I think, like, you can use WAR if you explain it. That's kind of the thing they're most comfortable with because it's easy to comprehend that. This much WAR, these many innings pitched, like, basically the quality of performance was here. I have 3 players who basically have that quality of performance who are making this amount. The other side tried to push with their comps a little bit forward. What I did was say, these players all have more innings. They have better seasons. They've been Cy Young finishers multiple times. They've repeated performance. Steele has had 1 good season.
Did you have a sense of what comps the other side would try to bring, or was part of the game that you had to figure out who those players might be?
So you put together, and I'll talk in specifics because this is a baseball podcast and you guys will
Yeah.
probably be interested to know the players. So with Steel, like you put together your deck and then you get the other side's presentation about 3 days before. So
Oh, okay.
for Steel, you put together a rebuttal based on what they did. I used, and we had a whole, you have to use specific players they give. So I didn't just pick these out of thin air. I used Jimmy Nelson, Noah Syndergaard, Tony Gonsolin. And Tony Gonsolin, I think, is one of the better comps because he's kind of the like up and down performance, good platform year, and he has about the same value. They want you to focus a lot on the platform year, like the year right before is very important. Syndergaard had a good career, about the same career value, and Nelson had a very good platform year. So it's like showing all the different angles, I guess. Whereas like the other side put together a presentation with Logan Webb, Luis Severino, Kyle Hendricks, and Jose Barrios. And this kind of done based on the platform years, but like you can know just from telling, like very established pitchers at that point in their careers, they had all made multiple All-Star teams, multiple Cy Young finishes, like by WAR higher, like in a higher range. And so how I won that performance was like first showing how Steele was an injury risk, how he hadn't pitched the quantity of innings needed, and then showing like essentially here's like the class he deserves to be in. They're trying to put him in this class. They're trying to like push the market forward, jump the line. He shouldn't do that. That's a successful case. I think when you put together like a rule and you say like you follow this, like you cannot not follow this because like everything, you know, every player here matches up with this player and he doesn't fit with the other ones. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And the question that I'm arriving at is, did you feel yucky when you were arguing on the team side? Like, did you ever have like a moment of clarity mid argument where you were like, this is what Randy Levine did to Dellin Betances?
Well,
and then you like freeze and your eyes get really wide.
It's funny that you say that. You get in trouble in these performances if you like really rip into the player. So
Interesting.
Yeah, my partner last year said they did it. They got in trouble. I saw the people across from me do it. They got in trouble in the Garcia case. I made sure to compliment him at every step of the way. I think that when you frame it as like, not that it felt good, but you know, it's you don't go in there. I think some people can go in there and be adversarial. For this, it's like he should be paid this because this is where he is in his career. Having said that, it was a lot more fun to be on the player side because you're really just like being the hype man. Like I was Adolis Garcia's hype man.
Yeah.
I'm like finding, you know, clips of him in the World Series. I found quotes of like Bruce Bochy and Chris Young praising his defense and his postseason performance. Like you're just really like you're a vigorous advocate for the player. It definitely felt a lot better, I think, to be on that side. And I think consequently, that was why I did worse because I kind of got like caught up in like, you know, this is my guy and I'm going to support him. Whereas for the club, I think it was like I was a little more cold and calculating.
Mm-hmm.
So like that kind of made it a better argument in like some weird way. But I will say, like in the final round we watched, like I saw them do the player side probably correctly. And then it becomes the biggest thing I learned is that you really have to like have your argument, have your persuasive, you know, with themes, but you just figure out like what your main theme is. You go with that. But the winning theme for Garcia, I think, is like power pays. You know, WRC plus doesn't drive the market. Home runs and RBIs and postseason performance do. You know, you compare him to Judge and Alonso, and it matches up well in that regard. So, while the club side's going to say, you know, Adolis Garcia, his WRC plus might not be as good. He's kind of like he might not be the all around player that deserves the money. On the player side, you know, it's just like he's won this, he's done this, he's hit more home runs. Pete Alonso hasn't proved anything. My players won the ALCS MVP. Like Alonso sat home in October. Like that's in terms of like
that's so it's like the
more fun.
Arbitration is like a baseball argument that we would have had with Dom in like 7th grade.
Like basically, yeah. Like it can be, I think.
How good could Roy Halladay possibly be? He won 13 games.
It can be as simplistic or as complex as you want it, but like you have to remember your audience, and the more complex you go, the more like if you're going to do complex stuff, I learned you want like a big graph that is so easy to read that like you couldn't misread it. You know, like trend up, trend down, or like
Yeah.
positive, positive arrows, like thumbs up. Like that's it has to visually flow. And I think like that's kind of what I learned is that like there's the step beyond just being the advocate. Sometimes like being an advocate's fun, but like you have to, think about it like you would if you're trying to like, make an argument against the player, but like just do it to support him. It's a harder proposition because like you're trying to move the market forward, but I think it really taught me a lot about, like arguing and I think for me, my writing is stronger than my oral advocacy. So like I kind of learned a lot about being argumentative, like what they need out of you in that setting. But man, the last thing I'll share is like the judges are all agents and team personnel and people have been there. Some of them are super nice. Some of them are real jerks. And
air it out.
It's the people you learn from the most. But I walked out of that Garcia period. I was like, this guy he worked for Wasserman. I was like, he doesn't know anything. Like, I feel like I crushed that. Like, I was so pissed off. I was like, I don't want to come back tonight. I don't want to go tomorrow. Like, I'm done. And then I turned it around and like, I took what he said. I applied it to the next one. But like that feeling, like I can imagine being in, a hearing and they don't, that's what they said. Like they hate to lose. If you lose a hearing, like that's got to piss you off so much because it's super competitive for like, the small corner of the universe we're in. Like it's, you're going toe to toe. Like it's not baseball, but it's like just as competitive. So also Rachel Luba was there. So I saw Rachel Luba. That was another.
Did you ask her how Trevor Bauer is going to like his additional year in Japan?
I just can't figure out if she has another client.
I think she only has clients who are accused of some sort of crime against women. Because Yasiel Puig, I think, was her client as well.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm not going to say anything bad about Rachel Luba, but definitely I feel like the others were actually like representing like people there. Like, I don't know. They would been in hearings. Like, I feel like she got in because of her name, but know. I also met Mark Feinstein. That was pretty cool.
Tell us about Ron Washington.
Yeah, then really funny end because clearly they wanted people to stay for this whole thing. So they put Ron Washington as a speaker at the very end, like after the awards were given out, because I don't think they wanted anyone to leave early. Ron Washington, he came into a room full of lawyers. The first question he was asked, like, oh, what do you think about the arbitration process? Like, it's like, I don't know shit about it. I just sit there, like, they don't tell me anything. It's above my head, basically. Then goes on like a 45-minute like rant. Honestly, like some of it was like really cool. It was just like they were asking him questions about like his experience. I think he just chose the time to just start like hyping up the Angels and talking about like his leadership in baseball. And like that part, there's parts where you're like, wow, this guy's a really cool leader. Like, and then there's parts where he was like, oh yeah, like the Braves didn't have any culture before I brought the culture. Like Brian Snitker learned it all from me. And I'm like, I feel like he's a little too like high on his own supply. It was just for a law, like room full of lawyers or future lawyers, I think they should have brought in someone from like, who actually like maybe was part of a team or something. I don't think he was the right fit. Like,
did you ask him how hard it is to play first base?
I did not, but I should have. He really didn't take questions. Like they asked him 2 questions. He was on one. He was just talking.
He was just going.
He said you'll love this. He said, he's talking about how there's like too much video in modern baseball. And then he said the gold standard for like organizations. Guess what he said?
The gold standard for
like,
organizations.
What organization do you think he said?
No. Let me think. Kansas City?
No. The Indians.
Oh.
Not the Guardians. He said the Indians. And one, clearly he's been out of baseball for 10 years. 2, I feel like that's not the gold standard, but like, I guess if you're Ron Washington, it kind of is based on what he values in the game. So
if Ron Washington thinks that you shouldn't score runs, then yeah.
Well,
yeah, for sure.
Everyone's overpaid, so I guess like nobody really makes money on that team. I could see
Yeah,
that.
that's true. Like Jose Ramirez is the cheapest star in baseball. Wow, that's some. So that guy is going to be managing a baseball team, and a lot of people think that's a really good idea.
I will say though, like if there was ever a team to give him, it's probably the 2024 Angels. Like
It is.
they really have nothing, and I
Don't
feel
talk about Taylor Ward that way.
other than Taylor Ward, Mike Trout, like I feel like that team literally could like, you know, they could I just don't know.
They're a
if
very
the
anonymous
manager's gonna
group.
Make a difference. Yeah, like I don't think
Yeah.
the manager's going to make a difference. I think like a Rock could be managing. They're not going to be good. So like, you know what? Maybe like he whips them into shape and like they win a few extra games. At least if I was an Angels fan, I think it was like entertaining.
Yeah.
And I just reasonably don't think they have like a chance at the playoffs. It was just funny. I think the Braves thing was the funniest to me because I'm like,
The Braves thing is ridiculous.
I feel like it's like they gave him, you know, like clearly he was an important figure in the clubhouse, but like I think, you know, they're all like, oh, okay, Ron, yeah, like whatever you say, and then like, okay, we're gonna just do our own thing anyway.
Do you ever see like the this is so like weird and specific. Do you ever get the videos of the guy from SEAL Team 6 who's like, yeah, I'm the one who killed bin Laden?
Oh yeah, yep.
And he's like the only guy from SEAL Team 6 who's like out there talking about going and killing bin Laden. And it's like, sure, you're definitely the guy who killed bin Laden. Yeah.
That's similar vibes. Maybe
I'm getting that vibe.
But yeah, I mean, really nice guy. But yeah, I don't know if baseball is at the same point he is, but I guess we're gonna find out. You know,
we're
what?
gonna find out
baseball because if everybody was like top data minds ahead of the curve, it wouldn't be fun. You got to have some Ron Washingtons to keep things interesting, you know?
Absolutely. So Whipple, before we wrap up, I saw a couple of tweets today saying that if Joe Mauer is in the Hall of Fame, Jorge Posada and Don Mattingly should be. Your thoughts?
I don't really like the arguments of like if X is in, then Y should be in. I'd rather just like evaluate everyone on their own. And I feel
okay, in that case,
right.
Is it correct that Jorge Posada and Don Mattingly are not in the Hall of Fame?
I do think that there is a case for Posada. I don't unfortunately think there is as much of one for Mattingly, but the Posada ship might have sailed, but the numbers are there, you know, like clearly he hit enough. And I don't think it's an insane take. I don't think Mattingly had the peak. But I'd be willing to listen on Posada.
I think the argument for Posada is pretty tough. I think so. We also got a question about McCann and Martin, who are both going to be on the ballot here shortly, as it relates to Joe Mauer. I think based on the stats, McCann and Martin have better cases than Posada, and I'm not particularly bullish on either of their chances. Like, I hate to be like the war guy. Actually, I don't. I love to be the war guy.
Yeah, what are you talking about?
But like when you play like a full career and you don't have 50 war and people think it's egregious that you aren't in the Hall of Fame, it's probably because your reputation is larger than like is not one-to-one correlated with your achievements or your play. Jorge Posada is this way, Don Mattingly is this way, Bernie Williams is this way. And for some guys, it doesn't matter because they were good enough to be Hall of Famers anyway. Like, I don't think a lot of people are aware that if Derek Jeter came back and had his entire career over again, he would still be a less valuable player than Willie Mays. But it doesn't matter because Derek Jeter was good enough by anyone's standards of anything to be a Hall of Famer. But like, when you're in the realm of like Ian Kinsler and people think it's by war and people think it's crazy that you're not in the Hall of Fame, it's probably because you're very notable, but not all of that notability is because you were like a transcendent player. And I think that's where, Mattingly should probably have 2 MVPs. I'll say that. He only has 1. But like a 40 war first baseman, that doesn't really do it.
only reason I'd like consider Posada is just because I think there's certain positions in the hall that probably like are underrepresented because of their position. Like we have to maybe not catchers as much. I think there should be more catchers. I really think we're gonna have to like reckon with what a Hall of Fame starting pitcher is.
Well, yeah, and the CC
Right.
Sabathia getting on the ballot is going to do interesting things there.
Right. And I mean, isn't Felix next year too? Or
Felix is next year too.
Not that I think Felix should be, but like I think we just have to think about what that means because there's been a while since a starting pitcher's been elected. I mean, what was the last one? Like, was it like Maddox and Glavine and Smoltz and Halladay? Or those were different years?
Yeah, Halladay, I think it would have been.
Okay. But like I mean, CC maybe, but like we're gonna have to, I think about it because the Mark Burley, Andy Pettit argument is closer than I think first glance it appears. And they are similar. And I wish they were getting more traction, both of them.
Yeah, I mean, two guys, Mark Burley, 52 WAR, Andy Pettit in the 60s. Both kind of like mid 80s ERA minus guys. To me, those are Hall of Famers. And maybe this is just reflective of like who's voting. And there are always trends in what the voting writers value. Like I think if Jorge Posada had retired 5 years later, you know, if you just shift his career by 5 years, but he still gets all the rings, I think he stays on the ballot longer. I think if Mattingly played today, he stays on the ballot longer. I don't know that either of them ultimately get elected. In fact, I doubt it, but like, it makes sense to me to say that Andy Pettit and Mark Burley will be like a couple of the first guys that we talk about as they were starting pitchers who were on the ballot at the wrong time, right before the shift.
Andy Pettit is a starting pitcher.
Andy Pettit is a starting pitcher. Yeah, I think like, you know, we have examples from the past. David Cohn is one, but I think like these guys who, you know, kind of just missed the shift, I think it's going to be Pettit and Burley. And I think that sucks.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, that's I guess the last point I'd make is like, whatever, you know, the writers want to do about morals and character. And that's kind of, I feel like that's a losing battle. But like, I would hope that like, you know, and we've seen it, but I hope that continues of like, you know, updating standards, updating, you know, what it means to be a Hall of Fame starting pitcher. Like, I think it's going to have to be a more serious conversation as we get deeper and deeper into clearly a different era of baseball that began probably like, you know, 13, 14 years ago. And I don't know if my faith is quite there, but maybe, you know, maybe it's just more new writers come in and the electorate naturally shifts, but it has to happen. Like, there can't be no starting pitchers in the Hall of Fame or like, you know, 3 in a decade. Like I promise you there are more worthy candidates than that. So like, let's hope at least the writers can start to grapple with what that means in the future.
Fingers crossed. Well, Whipple, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, the Yankees, who are the proud new employers of Marcus Stroman, are projected to lead the American League in Fangraphs WAR, depending on what projections you look at, what the depth charts shake out to as far as playing time projections, and then how you think about the interaction between WAR and team wins. You get yourself to kind of like a 92-ish to 96-ish win projection for the Yankees, and projected standings will start coming out probably in February. So with that preface, how are you feeling on a scale of 1 to 10, your confidence in the 2024 New York Yankees?
Well, I forgot what I said the last time. Probably pretty high, because I think with Juan Soto, you really can't not be that confident. And we didn't talk about Stroman, but I like the Stroman signing. I think we both are in agreement that, like, in terms of the resources, it's a good use of resources. Like, the Yamamoto ship is sailed. Like, I don't even think it's worth. I don't want to talk about it every time we talk about starting pitching for the next decade. But if you're going to pay Jordan Montgomery or Blake Snell, and maybe they still get one of those guys, I don't think so. But like, the immediate decision. I think giving Marcus Stroman $18 million a year to probably give a performance that's pretty close to that is cool. Like, I think it's really cool, like, that he wants to play for the Yankees and that he's going to be that good at that price. I think it's like a perfect match. And it kind of continues the trend. I don't think there's been a move this offseason that hasn't made sense. I don't think we've loved most of them. Maybe Verdugo was a little bit of a head scratcher, but like they all make sense in terms of what this team needs. And I don't think we've always been there in the last few years of like, oh, that move is the logical move, like trading for Donaldson IKF or trading Bader for Montgomery. Like, maybe they help the team, but it oftentimes seems like the Yankees were, saying, oh, we're going to come in minus a position or we're going to leave this open, see what happens. I feel like their bases are covered. Like, I feel good about everyone right now as it stands, plus if maybe a reliever or two. And yeah, like, they could use more depth. Every team could use more depth. I'm not going to get mad at a team for not having enough depth on January 23rd.
Yeah.
But in terms of like the first 25 or 26, like, I feel very confident this team is a better team than last year, both in terms of who's coming back and who they added. And whatever I was last time, 8.5, 9, I mean, I'll stay at a 9 because that's like as high as I'll go going into spring training, seeing how it all shakes out. But I think anywhere, from the high 8s, low 9s, mid 9s, I wouldn't blame you if you were at a 10. Like, I don't think we like to go there without seeing anything, but like, this team is, again, positioned to be really good. And that's kind of all you want at this point. But I think most importantly for me, I feel like every move they've made this winter has checked a box. And like, my brain says, this is logical. It makes sense. It helps the team. It doesn't hurt the team. And that has not always been true.
Yeah, no, that's right. I think I like the Stroman deal. I think it's like getting Jordan Montgomery for a lot less money. I'm shocked by the people who were mad that the Yankees signed one contact manager instead of a different contact manager. I thought that was a little bit silly. As far as my confidence, I am like supremely confident in the offense. I think that people have this like burning desire to tell you all the reasons why the offense is going to be bad. Oh, Anthony Rizzo isn't going to come back to what he was. Giancarlo Stanton's cooked. DJ LeMahieu isn't any good. Like, the projections are for all those guys to be between like a 100 and 115 WRC plus. That is not like incredible production out of them. The good thing about this offense is that it's going to be anchored by Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, and Gleyber Torres. And those are going to be three guys who between them average something in the, 130s or higher than that, because Judge and Soto are both going to be at 160 or something. So the average will be in the 140s. Like, when a third of your lineup is producing at that level, you can tolerate a lot of stuff that's not nearly that good. It's not a coincidence that this team is projected to lead the American League in WAR. It's not a coincidence that the lineup is projected to have the WRC plus that it's projected to have. Are there bets that they're making? Sure, but there are bets that every team is making. The Dodgers have a rotation full of guys who either always get hurt, have never pitched in Major League Baseball, or have pitched like 80 innings, and people are lauding them as the best team in the world. Like, I think people hyper fixate on the risks that their own team is taking and discount the risks that other teams are taking. Is there variance for this Yankees team? Of course. Is it possible that it's wider than it is for the average team because of their history with injuries? Maybe. I don't know if that's the case or not. But as constructed, do I expect this team to be really good? Yeah, I do. So I'm probably going to go to 8.5 just because I need to get myself more comfortable with the run prevention side of things. Like, I'm cool with what they have, but I just kind of want to see it come together. So I don't know that I'll move off of 8.5, barring like, injury news or some other kind of transaction. But man, I feel really, really good about this team.
Two things. One, I feel like I just maybe over the last few years, like the trend is I'm usually like more willing to trust their run prevention and I'm more skeptical about the offense. So, like this makes sense that like if the offense is meaningfully improved, like I might be slightly higher.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a good problem to have. I think the other thing is to everything you're saying, like they bought the biggest hedge bet that you could have against all this stuff happening. His name is
They
Juan
did.
Soto.
Yeah,
And
which is
that's
awesome.
Again, meaningfully different than how this team has been constructed going into previous years. So I think it's a very good point. Like it doesn't matter if Stan, LeMahieu, Rizzo aren't as good as you know, people might hope. They bought Juan Soto. Like
Yeah.
I'm tired of people
should not forget that the Yankees got Juan Soto.
Right. That wasn't a given. Like, why are we doing our offseason evaluations? Because, like, whatever our confidence is right now, the offseason evaluation, I think it would be similar between us in that, like, they crushed it by getting Juan Soto. It's not a given. By no means a given. And everyone's
only one team had a better offseason than the Yankees.
Right. And it just wasn't a given that they were going to get Juan Soto, and people are acting like he was already on the team. Like,
it's insane.
I mean, everybody who said, "Oh, get me Soto," and I don't care what else happens, like they did that, and they got 2 other lefty outfielders and a really good pitcher. Like, let's cool it. Yeah. Last year they didn't do that after Judge. They brought in 1 player. This year they brought in 4 meaningful impact players, in addition to everyone they had. So. It's different evaluations can happen. It doesn't have to be just repeating what we did last year.
All right, Whipple, as we get wrapped up here, any parting shots from you?
I don't know. I mean, Juan Soto. No, I think like I said, really excited about 2024, really excited about Juan Soto. Really excited that a Tampa trip might be in the works for me and Doug Whipple this year. Excited about potentially, I know you're going to Yankees Dodgers in June. You might be going to more Yankees games this summer.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's a big baseball year for us. The Yankees are going to be in DC, so I'll be there for that one. I'm sure Baltimore, they'll be there a few times. Like, I feel like we got a big baseball summer ahead of us. Hitting some dingers. The boys are bopping. Like, let's go. I'm ready.
Hot baseball summer. Yeah, I'm with you. A few just shouts out from the episode. Shout out Gleyber Torres. Shout out Hall of Fame inductee. Shout out at TH17HOF on Twitter. Shout out Marriage. Shout out. Did I already shout out Juan Soto?
Shout out Ron Washington again.
Shout out Ron Washington.
Keeping it real for us.
Shout out the Braves clubhouse culture. Shout out Walk Rate. Shout out Marcus Stroman. Shout out Juan Soto. Shout out Trent Grisham.
Is this a thing we're going to do at the end of every episode?
Shout out Luke Weaver. No, this is not a thing. All right. Okay. You can find everything we're up to at YankeesFiles.com. Podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts with the added bonus of video on Spotify. You can also find us on YouTube where we're Yankees Files Podcast. And you should subscribe to that and watch the videos and stuff. Handsome dudes. You can follow us on Twitter, of course, where we're at Yankees Files. You can even follow us on TikTok, where we're at Yankees Files Podcast. We will be back sometime between now and Whipple's birthday in mid to late February, which will feature our 100th episode. And until then, let's go Yankees.